Hey, if I were to ask you, would you like to know how to read people that surround you on a daily basis? I'm guessing your answer would be yes. And that's what this particular discussion is going to be about today. What most people call how to read people, oftentimes called in my circle of folks, navigating the human terrain, being able to look at people that surround you and determine what kind of things that they're doing, what kind of things that they're thinking, what kind of things that they're sharing with other people, as well as specifically for our purposes here, how to read people and know how do I read people and know if I'm in danger? So let me get a screen share going here so you can see what's going on. This topic is, again, typically called Navigating the Human Terrain. It's just kind of a real cool title for the topic. I want to talk about where this information comes from. First off, I taught hand-to-hand combatives and self-defense for several decades as a professional, and just being aware of what's going on around you is an integral piece of that. And so obviously learning how to read people and see danger before it happening to me and teaching people how to see that as well was important. Also, as a man tracker, I teach a lot of man tracking for federal, state, and local law enforcement, search and rescue, and biology students as well. Just how do you read tracks and determine what kind of things are happening? And can you read what's happening to people inside the tracks? So that was a good foundation for this. I was fortunate to train with some instructors from the Combat Hunter program with the United States Marine Corps, and so they relayed a lot of information to me and made me aware of some information that's available to the public. You don't have to be a Marine to get this information. So that's where a lot of this information comes from. I'm going to have some books at the end of this that are reference material for you so that you can dig into this topic as deep as you want to get into it, and we'll take it from there. This is a highlight version. You'll learn a lot in this particular course or in this particular presentation. But again, some people love certain topics, want to dig in, and I've got reference material for you. The first thing I want to talk about is what our strengths and our weaknesses are. I mean, the big thing is that most of us walk around not aware of what's going on around you. And so this is something that's an integral piece of daily life for people that want to be aware of what's going on around them. So just recognize that most of us don't see these things, but they can be seen. That's critical, recognizing what our strengths and weaknesses are. And again, this is just getting you started on the road. And again, we'll take a look at references so you can go deep if you want to. So there's several things here that we're going to look at: biometrics, proxemics, kinesics. These are all big fancy words that mean how to read people, some of the things that we can see. Now, biometrics are the things that are literally physiological reactions that all humans display. These are things that can't be faked, they can't be hidden. They're incredibly useful when direct questioning is being utilized, when you're speaking face to face with someone. Um, there's also the thought here, as I put in the presentation, the consideration of masking of each. Can people mask? This particular side of what we're discussing is very difficult to mask. There's some other things that we'll talk about in a moment that are easier to mask, and you should know that as well. So blushing, if we get embarrassed, if we're shy, one of the things that's common, and most people know this, is blushing. That's when the skin, particularly around the cheeks, gets red after some sort of emotional response. This can be shyness. This can be anger as well. People will blush, but usually this is caused by something that is an embarrassment or some even small form of shame. Blushing is similar to blushing. A lot of people will get this around their neck, and this oftentimes covers a much larger portion of the body. This is due to a hormonal change within the body. Some causes of flushing are things like alcohol or drug use, things like sexual arousal, or particularly the feelings of anger. You'll see a lot of people get flush around their neck when they get angry, and that's a sign that is something that you should be aware of, particularly for self-defense. Flared nostrils and lowering of teeth. Now, this is something that's built into basically our genetic makeup. So if we get angry, one of the things that's going to happen to us is that we're going to be ready for a fight, if you want to think of it that way. And one way we can get ready for a fight is to increase the amount of oxygen into our bodies. And so our nostrils will flare out, as we're bringing in more air into our body to get more oxygen from it. And this is almost always a sign of aggression or anger, as you can see in this particular tennis player here. He's showing his teeth. He's got his nostrils flared. He's angry about something in that particular instance. Paleness. Paleness comes about because there is a removal of adrenaline. You can imagine you get really excited about something, whether it's a fight or even just, hey, somebody you didn't expect is here and you're really excited about them. Adrenaline will happen after an event. An adrenaline loss will happen after an event. And this is sometimes caused by stress and or some outside stimulus. But usually, in general, it's an emotional shock. And again, keep in mind, this is after an event. So think about it. You go up on somebody and you see that they're incredibly pale. Something has happened immediately before you arrived at that situation. Something to be aware of. Pupil dilation is an enlargement of the pupils. It's typically associated with a low light or sometimes something or someone that they are attracted to. Basically, again, this is much like the nostril. This is built into our genetic makeup. We want to take in more information, so our pupils will dilate ever so slightly, sometimes excessively if we're under the influence of certain substances. And that's happening so that we can take in more information through our eyes. So this is all really good biometric stuff that we really can't, again, control. It happens. And very, very keen observations can be made and recognize that these are happening. Sweating, excessive sweating is caused by, again, somebody could be getting angry. Somebody could be upset. And so if someone is excessively upset or concerned or scared or something of that nature, they'll be sweating. And you'll notice they're sweating and they shouldn't be. This is not a time to be sweating. This is typically due to nervousness or some sort of nauseous event. Thermal signature is people's temperature will rise from obviously exercise and exertion, emotion like anger or arousal, and this can be felt or near someone. You can feel the heat coming off someone. Even a degree increase in body temperature due to anger, you'll be able to feel. You don't have to have physical contact with somebody. You'll be able to feel it near their presence. Now, kinesics is a little different. So kinesics is something where with ample training, you can mask these sorts of things. So these are not necessarily like the biometrics we were discussing before. These are what a law enforcement officer might refer to as a tell. So these are nonverbal cues. These could be body language. These are gestures, facial expressions, grooming habits, and as I stated here, placing yourself in a particular space. How do you locate yourself? Where do you put yourself in relationship to others? That's more proxemics, but it all goes hand in hand. We'll talk about proxemics in a minute. So first thought is that when people are telling the truth, they'll oftentimes put their hand to the forehead or in the front of their head, simply because this is where a lot of emotional thought happens and a lot of cognitive thought happens for us inside the brain. And so we will literally put our hand when we're trying to recall something. Maybe we can't remember. This is a good sign, actually. This means that someone's telling the truth and they're wanting to get good information to you. So you'll see somebody rub their forehead like this sometimes, and they're, again, drawing out this information. As I say this, I just want to remind you again, too, this is just general and a very gray area. Once you see these things and once we discuss these things here, this does not mean these are absolutes by any stretch of the imagination. These are definitely a gray area. But think of it like this. Think of it as a checklist. If you see somebody is sweating, they're flushed, their pupils are dilated, and their nostrils will flare, you've got 4 or 5 check marks there that somebody's angry. And that's something that you shouldn't ignore. That's just should be something you're going to try to use what I call verbal judo to de-escalate the situation. And if you can't, then you're going to remove yourself so that there's not a physical confrontation. Those who look up tend to focus on visual recall, meaning if you're talking to somebody and then they look up above them, they're trying to visually recall something like an experience that they've had. Those who are left and right are trying to remember something that they heard. So if somebody said something to them, they might look left and right, just trying to remember what it was that they heard. And if they're looking up, their gaze goes up, then they're literally trying to remember something that they have purposely seen. So that's a good indicator for somebody that's trying to get information from somebody. This stuff right here is really good. So someone that's attempting to deceive, and again, this is general. I don't want you to go home and think, or go to work and think every time you see these things that somebody's trying to deceive you or tell you a lie. But one of the things that happens when we start to deceive another person or try to deceive another person is that our body temperature will slightly rise, because it should typically make us uncomfortable. Some people are very good at masking this and avoiding this. And when that happens, one of the first things that happens is the pores on the back of your neck and your head start to expand to allow heat to escape. And because of that, people will rub the back of their neck, they'll scratch the top of their head, something of that nature, just because those pores are opening up. It's a quick indicator. Closing of the eyes is something that people want to forget. So if somebody's relating to you a difficult story, they might close their eyes or put their hand in front of their eyes because they don't feel comfortable talking. And it doesn't mean that they're trying to deceive you. It just means that they don't feel comfortable looking you in the eye. There's people in my life that do that all the time. That doesn't mean they're trying to deceive me. But again, if we start adding check marks to check boxes, then we can add things up and determine that somebody might be just trying to deceive us. Covering of the eyes or mouth are indicators of someone that is lying, because they'll talk to you like this, and they're not really comfortable talking to you about what's going on. This often shows in the way that they put their hand over their mouth, or maybe they'll look away from you and put their hand near their mouth or something of that nature. So this is an absolute critical piece of this for sure. Nervousness. When people wring their hands slowly, it signifies ill intent or nervous energy. You can imagine me in front of you here, or somebody that's in front of you with their hands going really slow. This is something that indicates nervousness, and that can be problematic. Rubbing the palms together quickly is a sign of anticipation. Yeah, everything's going good. Yeah, I'm really excited. This is a good thing sometimes. Yeah, really excited. So recognizing the speed at which people are rubbing their hands can be a very beneficial observation for you. All right, so this is some of the interesting things that, people that run corporations and entities purposely practice to demonstrate power. If it's somebody that you're trying to determine what's going on, then you can read these things and start to recognize that this is happening in front of you. Placing the hands on the hips, which is pointing, as the gentleman, the photo that I have in front of you. This, basically, think about it. His fingers are pointing towards the genitalia. It makes him look bigger because his arms are out to the side, makes him look more powerful. If someone feels threatened, however, they'll put their hands together, oftentimes over top of their genitalia, because they feel subservient, they feel threatened, they feel like they want to cover up their core and their genitalia. This one right here is a really common tactic that is often taught for people to display power, and at the same time, people that have not been taught and do it are demonstrating power moves, whether they realize it consciously or subconsciously. Oftentimes when you're talking to people, where their toes are pointed is a area in which they are focusing their attention. So if you think about, hey, if you're asking somebody, where is the so-and-so, and they've hidden it, their toes might be pointed that direction. If somebody's talking to you and their toes are pointed towards the door, as I listed in our presentation, then that means they're ready to go and get out of here. And so being able to read that is going to be integral to how you handle yourself talking, communicating to person in that area. Smiles. Take a look at this guy and these two different smiles here. Happy and genuine smiles are often uneven and cause a wrinkling of the face, and fake smiles are typically symmetrical because they're forced. And so in general, you'll see that this same person on both sides, the picture on the right, he's having a genuine smile. His forehead is furrowed a bit. He's got more wrinkles around his face. And so that would be an indicator of a position of, hey, is it a fake or is it a real smile? So pregnant pauses. Pregnant pauses are something like I'm doing right now, very awkward. Somebody gets asked, if you ask someone a straightforward question and there's a lot of pregnant pauses, then typically liars and those that feel intimidated are going to repeat the question. So there's a lot of people in my life that do this. It's an interesting thing to notice once you recognize that it's happening in front of you, to give them basically time to think or craft some sort of story. It could be that they're just uncomfortable with the question. They don't have a good answer. This happens a lot with people that are discussing important topics, and basically it turns into debate, discussion, logical reasoning situation, and they don't feel comfortable. And so they'll have a pregnant pause as a means to develop and craft an answer to the question because they feel uncomfortable. Doesn't always mean that they're lying. Oftentimes people will throw in very unnecessary details because they're trying to craft a lie, they're trying to craft a story and make it sound more believable by offering details that are really not important. Now, proxemics is interpreting the relationship spatially between people. So how do people, when they come into a room, how do people, when they're already in the room or if they're in the outdoors even, how do they, as they're related to one another spatially, how are they separated by distance and body posturing and stuff of that nature? Some of this is definitely in tune with cultural norms. So if you're on a high level of corporate um, international business, for example, recognizing the spatial relationships between different cultural groups is very, very important. And a lot of people that do business on an international level will study this in great detail. So this is just a few slides here, but this topic right here is very deep. Push and pulls. This is something that I think as a culture, as a society, we understand that there's distances for people. We use the term social distance during the pandemic issue. And as you can see, the noted distances here, the average, this has nothing to do with the pandemic. This is just a slide that I've been teaching for years. It's pretty indicative of how people, or it's how people interact with others. If someone's intimate, then they'll often be in that 0 to 18-inch range, and you can tell that people feel comfortable with it. People that are personal, that's 2 to 4 feet. They allow people into that 2 to 4 feet range. Typical social distance with people that are, hey, I know them, but we're not really close. That's going to be that 5 to 12 feet. And then public, we feel most comfortable with people we have absolutely no idea who they are when they're 12 to 25 feet. Again, I want to emphasize that in our modern world where we're getting more and more crowded, a lot of this we are forced to deal with, and we're actually forced to negate what's natural to us in recognizing danger. So you need to be aware of that. Even though a lot of times there's people that are within this distance, we've been taught that it's okay. And from my perspective, it's not necessarily a problem, but it is something to be aware of. And so think about it that way. People do what we call push pulls. Push pulls are when you feel uncomfortable with somebody, you'll start to distance yourself from them. So it might be, you think about my wife and I. So we're getting along, everything's fine. We might be in that 0 to 18 inches away from one another. But if we were to get into a discussion where we didn't agree with one another and possibly even it escalated into an argument or something of that nature, then we're probably not going to stay in that 0 to 18-inch range. We're going to start to push that out. That's a push. That's where we push things out and we get farther away. And think of just opposite as we come to a conclusion in the argument and or the discussion and come to a comfortable conclusion to it. Then where we were out that 2 to 4 feet or something of that nature, then we come back together and we can get back in that range with a hug or a kiss or something of that nature to indicate that we're in agreement again. So these are things that you can also do with the public and non-public. If it's a social distance of 5 to 12 feet and you start to feel more comfortable and more personal with somebody, you might allow them in your space and feel more comfortable with them in your space. And then if there's a problem and something arises where you don't feel comfortable, then you'll push back out again to that social distance of 5 to 12 feet. These are, again, just averages that come out of some of this research that I'm going to share with you at the end, some of the books that I'm going to share with you at the end. Now, leadership, you can read who the leader is in a group. This is important because think of it from a business perspective, think of it from a self-defense perspective, think of it from a even a battlefield perspective, which is where a lot of this research comes from, is reading the battlefield space and determining who's a leader. Um, Leaders will often be given directions and they'll be pointing in different ways. An entourage is a group of 1 to 2 people falling in a beta position. So the leader will be walking, and then 1 to 2 people behind them will be people that are in a subservient, a beta position. Mimicry, this is a real good one. So try to picture yourself being at a restaurant, and at that restaurant you see a couple sitting at a table. When they're in agreement, they're both leaning in, possibly even holding hands or something of that nature. If one of them says something they disagree, one of them will back up and lean against the back of the chair or the booth or whatever that they're sitting in. And that is where they're not mimicking one another. But if they come back to an agreement again, they'll come back together. This is actually true between different individuals, even in a basic business conversation. So you're in a room, somebody leans back, crosses their legs. You'll often start to see other people lean back and cross their legs. They're mimicking who the person is that they're looking to for leadership and direction. Being able to read that lets you know who the leader in the room is, who's guiding and directing. So if you're a type of person that's looking for a decision maker, you can quickly find the decision maker. And if you're in need of a self-defense situation, then you know who the leader is, and you need to, well, in a self-defense situation, it's typically the person that's closest to you, but you can also possibly persuade the person that's in the lead of others to do something different than what they're currently doing. And so you can avoid situations if possible. Adoration is often showed means of affection, I guess, towards a person. When they walk in, you bow your head, or when somebody walks in, you stand on arrival, or opening a door or something of that nature for somebody in a more leadership perspective. This is some really good, insightful things that you can see in the home, you can see at work. These are really good. Reciprocation is cultural norms of the environment. Look for them and notice those who don't. So think about it. If somebody wants to give you a fist bump or shake hands or an elbow bump or some nature, and you don't do that, then those are people that are not in agreement with one another. So you'll see that happening just the opposite. Somebody offers a fist bump and, we joke about it, but hey, don't leave me hanging kind of thing. Well, that's somebody that's definitely not in agreement, doesn't want to reciprocate the particular cultural norm. Think about it at a ball game, think about it in the gym, even at work. Somebody wants to shake your hand, somebody doesn't shake your hand back. That's problematic, and that indicates somebody has built a wall between you and them, and that's something you're either going to have to conquer or overcome, or something of that nature. You can also see this in strangers that are in an environment, trying to read an environment and say, hey, are all these people together? And think about it from a concert venue. These are some of these examples I'm giving are just obvious examples that you can then apply in a smaller form. Everybody's at a concert, boom, 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 and shaking their hand and rocking to the music or something of that nature. And then you look over in the corner and somebody's not doing that. Then a security person, law enforcement personnel, probably going to keep an eye on that area, because that's probably where the fight is getting ready to start. Just recognizing that that's not happening in that particular environment. Heuristics is that the time when some outside stimulus triggers a mental file folder. So mental file folders is how we categorize things that we've seen in the past, some things that we've read, things that we've heard. These are all filed away, even the smells that we have in our lives. These are all filed away in our brain, and something causes a trigger for that to come back. Recognizing that is something that's important for people that have received abuse or been the victims of abuse. There might be some smell, there might be some body positioning, there might be, somebody gets up close and holds their hands up, that triggers a response from somebody because they had a bad experience. This has been talked about in different cases where people were abused and there was a certain candle in the home at the time of their abuse, and they'll smell that candle 20 years later and it'll trigger a stimulus to bring that memory back. These are things to be aware of among your family and your coworkers. Um, these triggers are sometimes good things. Like I can have smells of things that happened when I was a child that bring back good memories. That doesn't mean that they're all bad. It just means that there can be things that trigger, and you should be aware of them out there. Let me go back here. Got off here. Statement analysis. Basically, think about it. Around 5:30, Johnny Woods Jr., was in the process of giving my son, Johnny Woods III, his scheduled feeding. During this feeding, he bucked and fell approximately 2 feet to the floor, hitting his head on the floor. His body landed head first. I attempted to catch him, but it was unsuccessful when I picked him up. He cried for about 90 seconds, then started to gag. His eyes were glazed. I immediately called 911. The fact that this person remembers all these details and is relating all these details about this is an actual call. So in this particular instance, this information right here tells us that he is basically making that up. The reason that we can know that is because a person who actually loves their child, and a child falls out of their arms and hits their head and dies, you don't remember this sort of detail. You don't relate his John Woods III. You don't relate 5 to 5:30. He bucked and fell 2 feet. Why would you remember 2 feet to the floor? These are all things that you're adding information to, and are most likely just additions to create a story to take somebody in a different direction. Human hacking is very dangerous, and there's a lot of books. I don't think I have a book in the back of reference material, but human hacking happens in both cyber and corporate world, oftentimes referred to as social engineering. Some people take it so far to even call it hypnosis. I like to refer to it as human hacking and social engineering. This is where you use particular environmental conditions or people's thought patterns because you know how they're going to respond when you use them. For example, you walk into like I'll give you a perfect example how I used to use this on purpose. I used to have a vending business about 30 years ago, and I had to go into a large metropolitan city and deliver vending goods. And it was always a terrible situation to try to find a parking spot and to then go in the front door and sign in and all that stuff. So more often than not, I would just pull right up on the curb with my van. I'd have a construction vest on and a construction hat on, and I would wait till somebody came out the door, and then I'd go in the back door, and I would utilize this construction outfit basically to get me in a door that I wouldn't typically go in. I wasn't breaking the law or anything, but I was just breaking, typical business norms. Now, from a security standpoint, this is terribly bad that this happens, but it happens. And so basically what I'm using is that somebody recognizes, hey, this is a construction guy, and we're going to let him in because he's getting work and taking care of the building that I work in, when really I wasn't doing that at all. I was just going in and filling their vending machines. So there's some ways to do this. And I'm sharing these things not for you to do them, but for you to recognize when people are doing them to you. Baiting is when you use an individual's personality against them. If you ever read about the Myers-Briggs assessment or DISC assessment, knowing what type of personality that people have, you can use that against them. If you haven't studied that, then look those up, the Myers-Briggs or DISC assessment. Pretexting is what I was just describing before. We're impersonating a person of an organization or habitual area. We'll get to habitual areas when we talk about how to read places or an anchor point. Phishing is impersonating a well-known organization. All of us are probably getting emails like this. I got several yesterday from Facebook that were not from Facebook. They're pretending to be Facebook. They're pretending to be UPS. So I'll hit on a link that either unloads malware, destroys my computer, or takes me to a site that I'm not interested in being a part of. That is all phishing. Now, here's some books for further study. The one on the left is one of the best ones that I've ever read on the topic of being able to read situations and people. The Gift of Fear by Gavin de Becker. I've been in courses with Mr. de Becker. There's several different podcasts with him on there. You can just look him up, Gavin de Becker, and see those, listen to those, read that book. Fantastic book. Left of Bang by Van Horn and Riley. These are former Marines who were in the Combat Hunter program. I'm not sure if they were there as instructors or just students. Either way, the book is one of the best books I've ever read on basically how to be left of bang, which means be left of a bad situation. A lot of this is related to battlefield tactics and battlefield observation, but it's very applicable information for daily life, without a doubt. You want to be left of a dangerous situation. Think of active aggressor, active shooter. The third book, if you're interested in the outdoors and wilderness type activity, this is my book, Extreme Wilderness Survival. This is my first book. The reason I recommend it here, because a lot of people like to recreate in the outdoors. The first 5 chapters of that book are mindset development. It's a very strong departure from your typical survival book, because the research has shown that a lot of people die in the outdoors because of poor mindset, quite frankly. And so I wrote 5 chapters, the first 5 chapters of the book on that topic. So if that interests you, jump on that. And then my buddy Matthew Dermody, he's written several books, but he's got a good book on situational sense. And so topics that you can look up are things like situational awareness, how to read people. Human hacking goes in a totally different direction, but I think you've given you an indicator of how that works so that you can see if somebody's doing it to you. These are all great ways that you can get into a lot of different topics as it relates to being able to be more aware of the people that are around you. So I'm quite confident this has given you a good start to it. These references that I've indicated for you are a good way to get more. And so if you have interest in those, then jump on them. And I think I can go back here so that we've got this. But yeah, here we go. I've got some Amazon links. If you use these Amazon links here, it gives a little bit of percentage back to Nature Reliance School and us here. So thank you for that. It's more important to me that you get the information. So use whatever link you want to, but this helps us for sure. Here's some books on human hacking. How to Be Your Own Bodyguard is a book I did not list. It's a great book. It's got a terrible cover. I'm not one who judges a book by its cover. I listened to the author on a podcast and loved what he wrote. Loved what he discussed. So look that book up, How to Spot a Liar, and I Can Read You Like a Book. These are all fantastic resources for you that I didn't have pictures of, because those other 4 are the top ones that I would consider important. You can check us out on the Nature Reliance podcast. We've got more information there as it relates to different things on how to read people, how to read the outdoors and stuff of that nature, and naturereliance.org for our website. So thanks for joining us. If you have any questions, put them down below and I'll do everything I can to help you. Come on, join in. Let's learn together.